This is part 1 of our series on quantum metamechanics, or QMM. And so, what Chris Langan realized is that there are all these different conflicting quantum mechanics interpretations, etc. But in order to evaluate these various interpretations of quantum mechanics, we need ontological grounding by identifying which parts of various interpretations are true, which are false, and then synergizing and evaluating all the insights to see how reality actually operates at the microscopic level. And so, in order to do this, we actually need a fundamental ontology, and the CTMU has this in the, as we discussed, the metaformal system. We're going to go over what everything means in future, all of that means, but all you need to know is that the CTMU provides a description of reality at the physical level, which allows for quantum gravity, for unified field theory, which Chris Langan hasn't published on this yet, but I happen to know that the CTMU can provide this structure, and it thusly and so you have this fundamental ontology in this CTMU metaformal system, which is actually a theory of everything, which relates theory and observation, and thus we can provide in order such that our preference for any particular interpretation, whether I like many worlds or the Copenhagen interpretation or John Wheeler's version, whatever, if I don't have a fundamental grounding ontology, a reason to prefer any one of these, because these are all interpretations, there's no objective way to know this according to current physical science. It's just, quantum mechanics is just basically a baseless opinion magnet. We must evaluate all of these in the CTMU metaformal system, and the metaformal system describes the entire universe as a function of an intrinsic language, which is a self-identification operator, which attributes existence to itself and equates the intelligibility, truth, and derivability of the universe to the universe itself, and thereby allows for this us to objectively identify reality and relates theory and observation so that we can extract out, because we really only have a few experiments about quantum mechanics, even though we can't observe everything that's ever happened in the quantum history of the universe. We have to abstract out the implications of our scientific experiments and how they relate to one another, and the metaformal system provides us with an objective metric against which to compare various theories. So the grand unified theory, which can relate the microscopic and macroscopic levels of reality, or respectively general relativity and quantum fields, and thus the 4 fundamental forces of physics, because 3 of these we know to occur at the quantum level: the electromagnetic force, the strong and weak nuclear forces, and these are at the quantum level, and gravity seems to occur as a function of the geometry of the universe at large. It's a very global force, and so we need to unite these into one fundamental force which can actually describe and create the universe that we live in. And this is done by the structure of this was actually provided long ago by John Wheeler, is that if one of this is happening at the global or level of reality with relativity, and the others are happening at the quantum or subordinate levels of reality, there's actually an intermediate level of utility, this agentive telesis, this quantum information being provided by human beings and other observer participants in the creation and evolution of reality. We're actually very important to the structure and evolution of the universe, because we're essentially the link. And so the metaformal system asserts the importance of human beings in relating these levels of reality. It's the only way you could do it, and science has completely ignored this for the last hundreds of years. Literally has been formulated as a way of escaping from anthropocentrism, and so it will take a great amount of maturity and understanding and deep, even metaphysical understanding of the actual fundamental nature of reality in order to resolve the quantum gravity. This can't just be physical, it has to be a metaphysical way of doing this. So this is principle 1 so in this video we're going to do 6 principles that will determine all of our future understanding of quantum metamechanics. So principle 1 of QMM: humans are important. And this is I'm sure you know about the quantum wave function quantum wave function. So essentially we find from this double slit interference pattern we can pass photons through double slits and our observation of this, we have this interference pattern whereby it's actually, it seems to be in a superposition where it's actually going into two states at once depending on which way we look at it. And so thus we've determined that there's a potentialization phase of quantum mechanics. It's this inner expansion whereby it potentializes to all possible things that a particle could do, and then all of these eigenvalues, all of these potentials are then, by some process, by this quantum wave function collapse into a single potential upon the act of registration. And this registration has to be done essentially by a human observer. So you have these two phases, this inner expansion, this whereby the quantum particles factorize into this infinite expansive potentiality, and then by some process so this inner expansion expands to include all potential, and then it re-quantizes it, according to the information that's been provided at the global and agentive levels or subordinate levels as well, since its previous state. It then evolves according to a state transition syntax. And the trouble of quantum mechanics is figuring out how is one particular universe and one particular quantum state extracted out from this space of potential, and why is it? What is the actual nature of that state transition syntax? And so Chris Langen actually explains this quite clear, is that in between there's this requantization, there's this inner expansion phase of quantum mechanics, all of this potential is extracted out. There's this talk in The Many Worlds by Hugh Everett. His interpretation of quantum mechanics is this multiverse. Chris Langen actually extracts this out into a metaverse. And a metaverse, if you look on Wikipedia, it will say that this term was initially coined by some science fiction author in the 1990s. This was actually coined by Chris Langen and then was subsequently used by Mark Zuckerberg to rebrand Facebook into the hideous, monopoly capitalist monstrosity that is Meta and its virtual reality world. But that's a digression. So there's this syntactic metaverse, which is, according to a syntax, according to a rules and structure, the universe expands in between acts of observation into a space of potential, and then it requantizes. It filters and constructs itself into a particular universe according to its teleology at various levels. The intrinsic ends and purposes are actually requantizing it. And so, the syntactic metaverse is unbound telesis. It's pure infocognitive potential. And information corresponds to space, and cognition corresponds to time. So it's any possible structure which can be manifested in space-time according to a basic syntax. There's some constraint on it, and then from that space of infinite expansive potential, it filters in and so that unbound telesis, that pure infocognitive potential, absolute self-generative freedom. And then that self-generated freedom, it actually generates one state. So this is truthful, and so this is why I've talked, somewhat poetically, truthful and good order is extracted out of that space of potential according to various teleologies. So the fundamental substrate of reality is telesis. So the inner expansion phase is unbound telesis, and then the requantization phase is bound telesis. It's actually been created into a specific quantum particle, and at the global level, it's a specific universe. And so telesis, this fundamental monic substance of reality, which has two aspects, which can bind and unbind in order to exist and evolve over time. It's unbound being this potentialization, and it's binding being that actualization. Telesis is a combination of energy and volition. So if you have a basic background in physical science, you'll know from Einstein in his special relativity papers, he talks about how kind of the fundamental unit of reality when you even abstract out beyond matter its energy, which can then instantiate itself in various ways. And the question is, if the fundamental unit of reality is just energy, this is Einstein's famous E equals mc squared, is that you can derive essentially infinite energy, and the actual full equation is E equals mc squared over the square root of 1 minus v squared over c squared. So at speeds close to the speed of light, you can actually create almost infinite energy from a very small amount of mass. And so so even below matter you have energy. But the question is, if reality is just energy, why isn't it just a homogeneous mixture of everything in the universe? Why are there star systems and galaxies and human and biological life? It just seems like this energy is organizing itself according to some sort of intrinsic purpose, and the CTMU thus abstracts out energy to include some metaphysical aspects. So there's obviously energy, but the telesis is energy plus information, or energy plus volition. So there has to be an information which determines how energy is distributed throughout the universe and its various intentional and extensional aspects. And then, so what provides that quantum information which, allows the universe to scale across all levels, provide information coherently, have this self-organization and self-emergence using this base energy, this base telesis. And it does this according to volition. There's this volition at the primary level, which is the volition of God, which is obviously the primary will. And then you have the secondary, and then you also have the secondary utility, which is what is the most utile environment for sentient agents, for observer participants to exist and evolve over time. And that's ultimately what reality is striving towards, is in order to give rise to observer participants over time, to define, reinforce, and extend the structure of reality. And so this is kind of an extension of what Schopenhauer was talking about when he says the world is will and representation. So there's this will in the non-terminal domain. So this is the tellers, and then in the terminal domain is actually the instantiation of this, using this energy, which is then organized into various configurations. So this is how this syntactic metaverse evolves. The unbound telesis becomes bound telesis according to the volition at the primary, at the global and agentive levels. And this is also how the quantum wave function collapses, that the inner expansion phase corresponds to unbound telesis, and then the requantization phase corresponds to bound telesis. So this is a generative 20 questions. This is what Niels Bohr, him and Heisenberg were really the founders of quantum mechanics. He talks about that, reality, there isn't really a deep reality, and I actually disagree with this in some sense, but it's interesting to what we're talking about, that there isn't a deep reality, that what we observe is not reality itself, but reality as exposed to our method of questioning. John Wheeler talks about this in his paper Beyond the Black Holes, that quantum mechanics is only almost like a generative 20 questions. So all my friends, we're having a dinner party, and they tell me to walk out of the room. We're playing 20 questions, and I start guessing, and they can't decide whether it's yes or no, but what I find out, they're giggling to themselves, etc. They're deciding whether the answer is yes or no on the fly, according to an intrinsic teleology, according to what they've willed for themselves. They're deciding the answer as I'm asking the question. So they're saying, should I say yes, should I say no, etc. And ultimately I arrive at a result according to the questions I ask. So this is what Niels Bohr says, that reality is not reality itself, but the reality we observe is not reality itself, but reality as exposed to our method of questioning. When I ask a question of reality by measuring a quantum state, reality makes up the answer on the fly according to the generalized utility of various timelines it could enact. This is the fundamental of Chris Langen's theory of quantum mechanics, is this idea of sum over futures, is that embedded in unbound telesis is every possible potential, and then it extracts out true and good order. It extracts out a particular timeline which is utile to itself at various levels of utility according to according to an intrinsic teleology. So this can't be done in a deterministic way, because then it would be gaining no information. It can't be done in a random way either, because then it would be basically doing a pointless thing. So this is principle 2 of quantum metamechanics, that causation is telic. It's not deterministic or random. It's actually towards an end or purpose. And further, one universe must be selected out of many possible universes for a reason, according to this teleology, at the global, agentive, or subordinate levels, which respectively correspond to God, human beings, and particles. So the superposition principle says that if input B, and this is leads into our fourth principle, that the superposition principle says that if input B produces X and input C produces Y, then input B plus C will produce X plus Y. The net output is the sum of the individual inputs. So Langen's extended superposition principle extends this to say that just as the state of an object is a function of what the whole universe is doing at any given time, thereby allowing objects to relate to one another and across vast gulfs of space and of time. This is why you can have this self-organization, self-emergent, this marvelous complexity that we see in the physical world, as we discussed with our telesis, and why we have to extend the concept of information to include this metaphysical structure. You have to have reality as kind of an undivided wholeness. It can relate to one another across vast gulfs of space and times, and read and write to its states and communicate with itself, even if it's not locally related in terms of it's close in either space or time, and thereby it allows for specific and complex relationships to form, including this self-design, self-organization, and emergence. So this is principle 4. Everything is enfolded unto everything. Nothing is random. It's coherent at every level. So principle 5. Quantum mechanics must scale. As a litmus test, let's say, what is the unisect between your theory and Darwinism? And so this is kind of weird, because people don't think about quantum mechanics as a theory of biological evolution, but it has to actually scale up, because what we're trying to do is relate quantum mechanics to a fundamental ontology, to how reality relates to itself intrinsically. So how does your theory explain the organization and emergence of biological life? And if you don't have a reality which incorporates the teleology concept, which can actually, whose structure, because this is Niels Bohr's correspondence principles, that if we have a true theory of quantum mechanics, then the test for that is if you take the equations to describe a large enough amount of quantum particles, then as we scale up to more macroscopic levels of reality, quantum mechanics has to actually reproduce classical physics. So this is the mark of a grand unified theory, is that as you zoom out, it remains intelligible on all levels. And so quantum mechanics must scale. And so if you have a grand reality which actually has a design for its universe, self-design, self-organization, emergence, then your quantum mechanics theory should be able to explain Darwinism, should be able to explain the origin and emergence of biological life. It's a tall order, but it's actually necessary to a fundamental understanding of reality to relate because if we have this quantum wave function collapse determined by human observers, then quantum mechanics must also explain how it gives rise to those human observers. This isn't an irrelevant fact, because this is part of its fundamental structure. So this is principle 6. To be is to be perceived. This is the maxim which was coined by George Berkeley, that the only reasonable interpretation, in my opinion, of the quantum wave function collapse, the double slit interference pattern, and the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which says that we can't be sure about the state of quantum particles in between observations because of these various observations and experiments that we've done. You have to say that the act of registration creates tangible reality. So to be is to be perceived. You have to relate perception and human cognition, our objective modeling of reality, to reality itself, or else you can't have this correspondence, and you can't have any structure which relates the global, agentive, and subordinate levels of utility. So that's part 1. Thank you. Let the light shine forth in the darkness. May the peace of our Father in heaven be upon you. Like and subscribe. Peace.